So I'm pretty sure it might be a little different these days. I don't know, but I know when I was a kid, there was a whole pipeline: go to school, wrap up grade school, go to college, get a job, and live life happily ever after that, right? Some programs in college, including mine, some of them have like I won't say quotas that they try to meet, but naturally they want as many of their students to graduate with a job in hand as much as possible. Many, I don't know about most, but many college programs do have this thing of trying to assist with the college to job part of it by trying to get as many, if not all, of their students in their programs, whether it's a business program, an engineering program, whatever it is. They usually try to get all of them to leave with a job in hand. And some programs track it. I know my old college program tracked it. So it's depending on the program, it can be a pretty big priority. I want to kind of push back against that because personally, the majority of my work experience has been as a contractor, and I'm just now recently converting to full time with the last contract that I did, and definitely a pretty big difference pay wise and otherwise. But one of the things that I actually appreciate when it comes to my current job, which started as a contract, and the other stuff before, was how much experience I'm able to put into this so that when I was inserted into this role, I still had to learn a lot. And I actually had a great manager who taught me a lot, both personally and professionally. But I think generally speaking, my contractor experience from previous contracts helped when it came to me pivoting into IT and doing pretty well in my job now, where I actually enjoy what I do, right? So basically, I want to push back on why, or at least offer another like route or vision as to why, if you're a college grad, if you're in college now, definitely try to leave with a job in hand as much as possible. But I would say contracts, like being a contractor, as soon as you leave undergrad or grad school, once you wrap up college, I think this should be a little more supported and pushed. And this is why. Before we get into the specific reasons why I think being a contractor should be more promoted, including like to active college students now, let's actually cover what a contractor is for those who don't know. So usually when you tell people a contractor, most people automatically assume that you are in blue collar work. They're usually in construction, something more handy, stuff like that, building houses, roads, and whatnot, right? There is a reason for that, but that's probably going to be its own separate video as for why. But being a contractor does not solely mean that you're in construction and you're paving roads and all this other stuff. Being a contractor simply means that the work you are doing is on a contractual basis. And for people like me who work in tech, if not in general, the whole thing with doing contracts is that you're going through a middleman. Usually, when you're a full time employee, it's you, the company you work for, and that's it. Every time that direct deposit, whatever paycheck you get, once that you get that, it should have that company's name on it. But for a contract, it's different. There's you, there's the temp agency usually or staffing agency that was hired by the actual company you're going to be doing work for. And when you get hired through a temp agency, you're technically not an employee of the company you're doing the everyday work for. You're technically an employee of the staffing agency that contacted you. They probably facilitated the interviews and stuff like that. But when you get your direct deposits, when you get your checks, that company, like say for example, if you're a contractor for Apple, every time you get paid, whether it's every week, because some contracts are like that. I've had contract. My first contract was actually like that. I got paid every week on Fridays. Then you have ones that stick to the regular biweekly pay frequency. So either way, say for example, if you're a contractor for Apple, you get paid every 2 weeks like everybody else. But everyone else, the full-time employees, their checks or their direct deposits have Apple's actual name on it. Let's say if you were picked up by just a regular staffing agency, your direct deposit is going to have the staffing agency's name on it. When either the physical check, if companies still do that, but usually direct deposits, you can see the actual company name. So that's how you know you're a contractor, or what some people call it, a contingent worker. That's when you know that you're doing everyday work. You have an ID, you have passwords, you have credentials to the laptops that the company provides you, all that stuff. You seem like a regular employee. The difference is, one, there's a pay difference, and we'll get into that. And then two, again, the pay does not come from, in this case, Apple, that you're doing all the work for. You go into their offices, their facilities, all that stuff, but they're not the ones technically paying you. The temp agency, the middleman, is the one that's paying you. So when it comes to being a contractor and why I think it should be like supported and more advertised. We're going to go over just some basic pros and cons that I personally have experienced, and also I just read up on, but again, I've experienced this stuff. So when it comes to some of the benefits of being a contractor, the main reason I say we should be more open to this and it should be more promoted, like we need, like kids need to know about this, young adults, mainly college students need to know about this and even be proactive about it, is because one, it allows your work experience to be very diverse. And I touched on that when it came to my last contract, which obviously I converted to full time and I like what I do. So the main benefit with your work experience being diverse is that it you get to dibble and dabble a bit. Some contracts, they're meant to be 6 months, some 3 months, some a year, some are ongoing, so there's never a genuine ending period, but maybe the position will be reevaluated every year. So if you start on January 1st on a contract and they're like, it's ongoing, you can do this literally as long as the people need us to, there's no real end date to it. But that next January 1st, the following year, you'll probably do some type of reevaluation or something, to like discuss pay increases if you want to request that, maybe shifting to a new position, all that stuff. And this allows you to dibble and dabble when it comes to different positions that you want to be in, get what some may consider like entry level or closer to entry level work experience. Like my first contract was in a call center basically. And now my current position, part of my job function is essentially an elevated version of that. I work with help desk a lot. And my first contract was essentially a call center help desk type environment. So yeah, it allows a certain level of progression. Another benefit when it comes to that, like a side benefit, is you may not have to stay in a position for 2 or 3 years before you can be promoted or move up to a more senior position. You may do a contract that was 6 to 12 months in a help desk or call center type of role. Your next position may be what would be considered a move up from that because you've done that already. Many people, whether they're analysts or other things, they usually have to stick with that for 2, 3 years, if not longer, before they can be promoted in a company or move up. But since you're a contractor, you're more flexible. You still can get dropped at any given time. That's one of the cons. We'll get into that. But ultimately, it allows you to just put your hands to so many different things where you can be helpful and useful in multiple environments. The second, and arguably the biggest pro, honestly, you can make a lot of money. Contractors, blue collar, white collar, just contractors can make a lot of money. They can, because technically, one of my other contracts that I did, not last year, I want to say 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. It was very short lived. It was only for a few months. This was back when the PPP loan thing was still pretty ongoing, and I got a contract job that revolved around that. Another kind of help desk is type thing, but again, more like elevated. Technically, like at face value, that job was only 20 an hour. I was not making that much great money, right? Compared to my first tech job, which I think I've shed light on that already, was equivalent to about 25 to 26 an hour. My first big boy job in general, which was also full time, I was full time in both cases, was about the same. They were both like 50, 52K a year, respectively, right? And that usually equates to about 25, 26 an hour. This contract was only 20 an hour. But the benefit was, unlike full time employment, another benefit, you get paid for the work you do, So that can be a little dicey depending on your pay rate and the type of work you do. But there is a good side to that because they open, the opportunity for overtime, out the gate. So I didn't know, but out the gate, we were able to work as much as like a full 80 hours as long as they could tell that we actually did some work over the weekend and everything. They usually, or at least starting off, they didn't care that people were doing overtime and maxing out their overtime left and right, and we were getting paid weekly every Friday. So my contract rate may have been 20 an hour, but once that time and a half kicked in and I maxed out my overtime at 80 hours and then they eventually cut it down to 60, even then I was still clearing maybe 2 to 3K a week, I want to say, before the firing or I guess layoff waves, with that company, with that opportunity started, eating away at us because there wasn't enough work for them to justify keeping everybody. So, but that was a good thing. It was nice. So it was like at face value, yeah, I'm not making a whole lot. But if they open opportunity for overtime and I take that, max it out, and I just make a huge benefit out of this, you can make more in a contract that at face value pays less than any other job. But compared to your full time, like positions and counterparts, The whole thing with full time is that it's supposed to cover your OT, which, that's a whole monster in itself. We can talk about that later, but a lot of people don't like it. So, again, it's a little bit of a dance when it comes to getting paid for the work you actually did. But depending on the pay frequency and whether or not they open the door for OT, how much OT can you do, and all that stuff, and your pay rate, then it can be very lucrative very quickly. And I already kind of touched on this as far as the last one, which was because if you stick to contracts and if you wrap up one contract after a year and maybe they just choose not to renew, not because you didn't do good, but maybe they just don't need the project anymore. The project that you were hired for is done, you did your job, and they don't have any immediate openings, or maybe they do, so you can just pivot to another opportunity. Maybe you convert full time, whatever the case may be. But again, a key benefit is you wrap up a 6-month contract, a 12-month contract, and you do 3, 4, or 5 of those, then you have a pretty decent idea, or hopefully will have a pretty decent idea of the type of work that you like to do, the type of work you're good at, and like what version or type of environment you would like to do that work in. And from there, if and when you eventually convert to being full time, and maybe you want to stick with a single company for at least a few years before trying to pivot again, you'll have a bigger skill set, hopefully more money, especially if you do it while at home, which I seriously recommend that. And then of course, super diverse. So even if you want to focus again, like I'm in IT service management slash IT operations, if you want to stick with that, then you could, but maybe one of your contracts puts you in the graphic design or like marketing area, so you can be useful there. So if people are open to it, then that can be a side hustle for you when you do it on your own time. You can get part-time contracts. Those are a thing. And maybe you can do a part-time gig that's about marketing and something else. So again, it allows you to see a whole lot, put your hands to a whole lot. You become very diverse, you become useful in various environments. And that usually leads to, more income, expanding network, and a bunch of other benefits. So when it comes to the downside of being a contractor, one of the biggest things is you make less money. And I know this might not make any sense because I literally just said you can make a boatload of money. It depends. It really depends on the contract. Because again, that contract where I made more money hourly, like at face value on the contract, hourly I was making less. The 2 other full-time jobs I mentioned, where I was making noticeably more than that, or I should have been. But because the opportunity for overtime was open, then I was clearing far more money with the contract that at face value I was being paid less compared to the 2 full-time gigs where, yeah, I may have my set hours, but if they need me to stay, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and do extra work and this and that, well, as a full-time employee, they're not going to pay me overtime. So that's where a lot of people have that issue. But that is their other side of it depends on the type of contract you're doing. Like when I was a contractor before pivoting full-time here, um, basically my job is dependent upon the hours of the accounts that I'm responsible for. So that's why I don't work weekends, because there's nothing for me to do. Therefore, no way for me to get paid. There's no logical reason for me to get paid because most companies, in terms of like the corporate offices and stuff, are down for the weekends. They're not doing that usually. So if they're not working, I'm not working. But that other contract where I was making a good amount of money, it was only 20 an hour, at least, on paper. That was not like a client facing type situation necessarily. That was one of those type of contracts where, you know, over the weekend, just in general, like the work is there. You log into the system, the work is there. You just pick it up and start doing stuff. And, if you do overtime and they see that you cleared however many applications and submitted whatever forms and all that stuff, well, you'll get paid accordingly for it because they can prove that you did your work. So it really depends. You can make more money, but you can also not make quite as much. It really depends on the nature of the contract. Two, and I touched on this earlier. There's a certain level of uncertainty and therefore anxiety that just comes with being a contractor. Because when you're a full-time employee, one of the benefits, and I may talk about this later as well, because I'm kind of iffy about this in the way that a lot of these companies are doing their massive layoff waves. I think I may talk about this later. But one of the things with being a full-time employee that's supposed to be a benefit is the company has to legally leave a paper trail leading up to you being terminated, whether you just weren't good at the job, maybe you don't mesh well with the team or the other workers in the environment, just you doing stuff wrong, or if we're being open-minded, maybe there's a certain level of bias, but they have to play the game, so they still have to leave you a paper trail. So they may fabricate some stuff, or they may blow some stuff, over exaggerating certain errors and mistakes you made, or claiming that you made a mistake and really didn't. Whatever happens, because I've dealt with that stuff. They're supposed to leave a paper trail so you can kind of see it from a mile away. That's why a lot of people, some people don't like this, but a lot of people will tell you the minute you get put, for example, like on a PIP, a performance improvement plan, a lot of people, and my daddy even confirmed this with me. He was like, if I put you on a PIP, again, performance improvement plan, which basically you have a set window to get your act together when it comes to how good you're doing the job, because you're not doing good right now. Maybe your attendance is bad in addition to your performance, whatever the case is. For one reason or another, you're not doing too good and it's not looking good for you. And most people say when you get put on that type of plan, or if you've been written up once or twice, and you're still like working for that company, most people will tell you go ahead and start looking elsewhere for another position. Because again, even my dad confirmed it. Yeah, if I put you on a PIP, I'm making it up. I'm trying to get rid of you. I'm just leaving a paper trail. I'm trying to get rid of you, right? So there's also that mindset of once people put you on a performance improvement plan, they've made up their mind that they want to get rid of you. You're not good for the job. You're not good for the company, but they have to play, the legal game because then you could sue for like retaliation or whatever, fits the circumstances. But with contracts, you can get dropped literally at the drop of a dime because that same contract I was referring to, the $20 an hour one, that what was happening. There were layoff waves or firing waves, whatever. Like I think I got hit by the fourth one, so I managed to stay around for quite a bit of time. But there were definitely firing waves that happened maybe like after a month of the contract going up and them hiring people and training people and putting us to work, and you just never knew who was going to be hit. And when I found out, it was literally, I think, at the end or close to the end of the workday. So it was literally just, oh, hey, by the way, today's your last day. It's like, okay, that's the nature of contracts. You honestly can't be mad about it. If they cannot justify keeping like a lot of people on their payroll because they don't have the amount of work to support it, or if there's anything else, like maybe again the project is done, maybe something went wrong with the customer that they had the relationship with, whatever the case may be, they one reason or another they can't keep a lot of people or as many people or anybody around, so they just drop a dime. We gotta clear these people because we don't if we don't have this money coming in from the contract, we can't bring them, or rather we can't pay them, especially when it comes to overtime, because again they start chopping out on overtime just a little bit. So there's a few different factors, but bottom line, it's just a level of uncertainty and therefore anxiety that can come with contracts, because you can be doing very well at your job, but some stuff behind the scenes happen that had nothing to do with you, and suddenly you're out of a job. It could also just be you managed to clear the whole contract for it's a set amount of time, 6 months to 12 months. And you can even have been looking these days, you can go a year plus without finding a job, at least on the corporate, like white collar side. So you can have a 6 to 12 month contract that's keeping you afloat, but if you spend that entire time period trying to apply to other jobs, these days, you're probably not going to get anything, you know? So then when it's time for that contract to end, they don't have any other positions to throw you into. They don't, renegotiate the pay if they do keep you. It's a bunch of things that can go wrong. So again, it's good, but it can have a certain level of uncertainty, which just makes you feel very uncomfortable at times. Another big problem when it comes to being a contractor, either no benefits at all, or the benefits have an extremely high cost. And when I say high, I mean high. Like my benefits through as a full time, all my benefits are less than 100 every time I get paid, which is a bit much. But as a contractor, if I wanted the same benefits, even just my medical, even if I didn't get vision or dental or any other stuff, if I had gotten medical benefits through the temp agency that I used to do the work for, they would have charged me almost 300, like mid 200s to almost 300 every time I got paid for medical insurance. And now I'm paying basically a third of that for everything every 2 weeks or so. That is a big difference. But my first contract, when I was in that call center help desk environment, we weren't getting benefits at all. It wasn't even an option. I think more and more temp agencies are doing that, maybe for certain positions where they bring you on and you can get medical insurance and like other benefits through the temp agency, but it's a much higher cost usually versus being an actual full-time employee. Usually the cost is not nearly as bad. Why those numbers are so like different, I don't know. But yeah, that's another thing. Either you're SOL and you don't have any benefits, so even when you have a decent paying job or you're introduced to a company and an environment you want to keep, it's like maybe I have kids I need to take care of and I won't feel completely secure and comfortable until I have these benefits for myself and them. If it's just you, well, even then, the high cost is so crazy, especially if the contract's not paying that well and there's no overtime to like balance it out. So if you're only doing a $25 an hour contract, for example, it wouldn't make sense, especially if you live by yourself with the high rent costs and everything. It wouldn't make sense for you to pay 200, 300 something dollars every time you got paid for medical benefits just by itself, let alone dental, vision, and all that other stuff, right? So that led to me personally being like, you know what? Screw the benefits. I'm not worried about it. Just give me the biggest paycheck you can give me. So when it comes to like the ultimate takeaway and the ultimate reason I say college students should look into being contractors for at least, in my opinion, give yourself 1 to 3 years out of the college gate. And if you just want to stick with it, then stick with it. But if you want to eventually convert, then feel free. But I think 1 to 3 years is fair to be a contractor, especially if you can do that when you're at home. And one of the like bigger like reasons, like the ultimate takeaway, more than any other time in history, we're seeing that being schooled is not really effective in the job market. It does help because that contract that I keep referring back to, the $20 one, I was only able to take that job. Like they didn't care what type of degree you had. If you had a degree, that you were eligible for the position, and it was legit. You know, I've never had any legal issues tied to it. So they were like, "Hey, man, if you want the job, you can have it." They just needed people. They didn't even care for actually interviewing and all that other stuff. It was like, "Do you have a degree? Yes, the job is yours." You know, so and I tried to put some old coworkers from an old job that I couldn't stand because I liked the coworkers, I hated the job. So I tried to put them onto it and see if I can get them into it because we all hated that job, and nobody else had a college degree but me in that gas station, so they couldn't entertain it. I was the only one that was able to entertain it. So I know there's that rhetoric of college degrees don't mean you're automatically be successful and this and that, da, da, but as rare as it is, because it's rare, there are only opportunities that like you can only entertain because you have a degree. It can be liberal studies, it can be engineering. It don't matter. If you have a degree, in some cases, especially with contracts, that in by itself will put you up over people. It's not the end all be all, but it helps. Yeah, guys, I'm gonna go ahead before I keep rambling. I'm gonna end the video off here. If you have any feedback or questions for me, leave that for me in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.